next question is from Castor Troy. Concerning the subterranean lake of honey, what does it actually represent, if it represents anything at all?
Well, on this planet, if we had something that represents temperature, it would be mercury, right? You can put mercury into a vacuum of glass, and then you put little lines along its side. Excuse me. And you
Okay.
can measure the temperature reliably, no matter where in the planet you are, right? Very, very bizarre phenomena there. How mercury condenses and expands based on temperature, and it's reliable, right? Like kind of amazing. Thermometers been around for a long time, and to a large degree, a lot of them still operate the same way. So I find that uh, idea very interesting. And honey, I thought, was a good mercury if we were having a thermometer that measured the health of a planet. So the idea, and we've talked about the lake of honey a bit, is that when it's high, we call it high tide, the earth is in good shape. And the reason that we can just measure that is we go because the bees are flourishing, right? Like very simple measurement, right? How's the earth doing? There's two things you can ask yourself. I mean, I don't agree with the climate alarmists, and I think it's an extremely deep topic. And I don't mean to, piss anyone off or anything. But the point is, if you really cared about the health of the planet, number one, you'd be saying, how are the bees doing? And the bees are doing terribly, right? That's not even in the climate, agreements. And fuck the bees. There's no talk of pesticides. There's no talk of the bees. But the bees are going to wipe us out. If the bees are gone, we're gone. Like we're gone. That's it. The other thing is plankton in the oceans. And what's wiping the oceans out is plastics, for the most part. Plastics. And I've talked to some of the world's leading marine biologists, fortunate enough to have some as friends, and they know that you can't talk about this. And in fact, if you go to the world leading oceanographic NGOs and stuff, uh, they don't even call it plastics anymore. And there's a reason for that. And I don't want to get into all the corruption of these things. But the fact is, if you're really measuring the planet, the last people I tell us to what's important and what's not is political groups and banking groups and stuff, things like this. Um, and so, if the health of a planet, I think, could be very easily measured by the amount of honey it's producing, because that would mean it has the environment to where that's flourishing. And if that's impacted for whatever reasons, then that environment wouldn't be flourishing. So that would be low tide. So the idea of honey was that it's something produced by the bees, and the bees are a measurement of the health of an ecosystem. And then I was thinking, what if you turn that into a thermometer, and you had it with a obelisk in the center, which is essentially the document of time, and it starts at the top. So that obelisk, these things I just really got into in the design of it, but never got to talk about. At the top of it, we go is the beginning of history, and then by the time it comes down to Abe, and in the sequence you saw like it's lighting up and the information's flowing down and it's hitting and it's right into Abe's hand, and at the bottom is Abe's face carved in it. And throughout the eons, they've been putting more information of the history of the world in there, and then they were projecting forward where the future of the world is going, and that's where Abe is, right at that crisis point, the tipping point of will they continue to exist or will they not. And so putting that in a framework where that really became the thermometer, and then a druid like style of rocks around it, just by looking at the lake, you could tell if it's high, it's only sort of blissful faces in the tops of these rocks. If it's low, they get more horrific. So you could just look at the level of the lake and be like, oh my God, these faces are revealed. We have problems. So I hope not to carry that one out too, but I hope that answers the
Well,
question.
yeah, there's a follow-up question to this as well from Jojo Eats Flan, and asks whether or not, if the Lake of Honey overflows, and if that was to happen, would that mean the keeper would be flooded out of a home and, well, flood out of
And,
the
and
home and go and live on the surface.
well, let's say if that were possible, right, that it could overflow, that would mean that things had gone so well they don't need the keepers anymore.
Okay.
It's kind of like those figures emerge out of a crisis, a foreseen crisis or an actual one. You know, we don't get heroes in times of peace so much, right? We get them out of times of crisis. People willing to step up, risk their lives for the right things, for them to do the right thing for the majority, not just for themselves. And that tends to happen most in periods of strife. And what happens oftentimes with cultures, the more they settle into peace, the more something is brewing underneath that's going to unseat that peace with time, which is, I think, a record of what happened to most of the indigenous cultures on this planet.